Okay, way we're going to do this panel, I'd like to invite each of these gentlemen to say a few things about themselves and explain what their role is for in the sale companies. And I'll start with our host, Walt Robertson of Keeneland.
Well, I'm Walt Robertson. I'm Vice President of Sales here at Keeneland. I've been here since the first of 2011 and worked with Boyd and Bain prior to that for a long time.
Okay, now we have Will Meyer. You say Meyer or Mayer?
Mayer.
Okay. Mr. Mayer.
My name is Will Mayer. I've been with Keeneland for almost 3 years. I'm a sales associate. I oversee our international development program, and where I focus on the emerging markets particularly. And before joining Keeneland, I was a management trainee with the Darley Flying Star program.
Okay, moving to Fasig-Tipton, we have Boyd Browning.
Hi, I'm Boyd Browning. I've been with Fasig-Tipton forever. I do whatever Bain and Bill Graves, Terrence, and so forth won't do. So that's pretty accurate.
Okay, finally we have Bain Welker.
Hi, I'm Bain Welker, Vice President of Sales for Fasig-Tipton. I've been with Fasig-Tipton since 2009. Formerly, I have been a consignor with Mill Ridge Farm and also my own agency, Welker Sales Agency.
Okay, thank you. What we're going to do here is I've been supplied some questions. I want to ask the same question of each of the panelists in some cases, and others will be specific. First, I'd like each one to just give us your overall assessment of the North American sales market as we've come through 2013 and as you look ahead to the rest of 2014. Walt?
Well, although we're probably not completely recovered, I think we're most of the way there from the crash in 2008 and 9. But last year, the thoroughbred market in gross dollars was up about 30%, pretty much across the board, and that was off of a pretty good 2012. My opinion, the obvious reason for these increases is the law of supply and demand. Supply and demand used to be our biggest enemy, and now it seems to be our best friend. Over the past 7 years, we've seen the North American annual foal crop drop from over 38,000 down to 23,000, which is approximately 40%. But more interesting to me is the other side of the equation, which is as broad as I've ever seen, and that is demand. Since last year, 18 of our top-selling yearlings went to 15 different entities, when in 2008, the 18 top-selling yearlings in September went to only 9 entities. So it's a lot broader based and has a lot more depth than it did at that time. Back in the early 2000s, I think you were trying to make 2 or 3 lists, and if you didn't there, you couldn't sell a horse for a lot of money. And today, there are a lot of people that can give you a lot of money for a horse. And this was pretty interesting, and I'm sure it's everywhere else in the country, but we had here 69 different people that spent over $1 million while they were here in September. Foreign and domestic buyers alike showed strength at all levels of the market, and I think that the bottom, I've never seen it as strong as it is now, both in terms of the prices realized or the sold percentage. A lot of the bottom strength is not totally because of the market, because we have a lot of the mares that of that 15,000 mares that have left the market or don't produce anymore. They're basically off of the bottom. So I think that the bar has raised quite a bit from the bottom, and the last few days we're selling a better horse than we used to, and I think that's the same with other sale companies. Used to be, you know, your last few days you didn't know many of the horses or the sellers, and today that's not the case. I mean, they're familiar pedigrees, familiar sellers. The buyers may not be so familiar, And that's another reason for the strength at the end is we're doing pretty well with emerging market, and we're seeing some new buyers from all over the world come in here.
Boyd, what's your take on the market?
You know, like Walt and most of the people in this room, I think we saw continuation of recovery in 2013. A variety of reasons, most importantly of which is the supply and demand. I think we've seen an overall recovery in the world of marketplaces in general. People have more consumable or disposable income and probably have more confidence in spending some of their wealth. You know, like it or not, a large portion of our top-end activity is driven by, you know, very, 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 very wealthy individuals. As they have more confidence in the world, more confidence in the economy, they obviously have more confidence and more willing to participate in our business. And it is a trickle-down effect. The more activity you get at the top end, it trickles through the middle, it trickles through the bottom. So there's definitely increased activity through all levels of the marketplace in 2013. Very encouraging, as Walt said, the breadth of the market. You're no longer relying upon 1 to 2 buying entities, but there is much broader support. That being said, I think that most of the men and women sitting in this room would still continue to say it's not easy. You've still got to be very discriminating and knowing what product that you have. Buyers still are reasonably selective. They may be less selective today than they were 24 months ago because there is less product available, but it's still not an easy game whether you're selling yearlings or whether you're selling weanlings or whether you're selling mares. You better know your product, you better have realistic expectations, and you better try to do everything right between the day that horse is born and the day that horse is sold to try to maximize your revenue.
Thank you. Turning to the international aspect, Will, could you explain Keeneland's role in developing and serving your foreign customers?
Sure. Well, Keeneland's always tried to take a proactive role in developing international markets, and certainly it extends to more than just trying to garner customers for our sales. We really see it as an effort to go out and help developing countries develop and expand their racing and breeding industries. So to that end, you know, we'll go out and visit countries. Last year we visited 24 different countries. We sponsor races in some of those countries. We sponsor races in 6 countries last year. We have a couple more that we're looking at for this year as well. We visit the farms, we view the stock, we talk to the breeders, we go to the races and visit with the owners. And, you know, basically just try to spread the good word about what you all, the breeders and consignors, are doing. I think certainly at the end of the day, these people, they show up for the stock, and that's what you all bring to the sales. So you're to be commended on that. You produce one of the world's greatest products as far as the quality of bloodstock that you have. What we're trying to do really is just to advertise as best we can the quality of that stock. So in addition to just going out and meeting with people, we're doing things like advertising the success of American breds in the international races. Particularly in 2013, we had a very good year. There were several major winners at Royal Ascot. We had 3 American bred winners at Royal Ascot. We had 2 of the major winners on Dubai World Cup night. So I think it really speaks to the strength of the thoroughbred that we're producing. And whereas for a few years there was certainly the conversation about stallions, I think, really kind of revolved around those European super sires. Nowadays, there's really a lot of international demand for the progeny of American sires. And, you know, breeders and owners have recognized the strength of that bloodstock once again. So I think it's something that you should be commended on.
When I listen to the news tonight, the phrase developing country may mean something a little different. Can you give me some examples of countries that just in the last couple of years you've visited for the first time?
Of course. I think certainly Keeneland's always had an international aspect to its sales. For a long time, really, that was basically 4 countries. It was the UK, Ireland, France, and Japan. So basically all the other countries that you see represented here, and it's upwards of 50, over the last 3 or 4 years, we've had buyers from as many as 57 different countries come to our sales and send bloodstock back home. So some of the more prominent markets that we're seeing really come in and make an impact at the sales nowadays are Russia, Qatar, South Korea is very much an expanding market. We're seeing the Saudis step up and play again. And of course, you know, down under you have Australia and New Zealand to a lesser extent, but it's one of the markets that we see is coming along, and it has potential to come and buy American bloodstock.
Thank you. Thank you. Bain, could you take us through some of the things that go into your decisions about which horses are best suited for your various sales, specifically July, Saratoga, and October?
Certainly. And Ed, before I get to that question, let me just make one comment here. A big round of thanks to the CBA for putting all this together. There's no paid executive director with the CBA. There's a lot of sweat equity that goes into this organization, and a big round of applause for everybody that's put this thing together. So Ed, everybody knows that Fasig-Tipton doesn't just operate out of Lexington, Kentucky. I mean, we operate out of multiple states. We service a lot of regional markets. So when we're out on the road and we're looking at horses anywhere from California, Texas, Florida, through Canada, a lot of those horses that get nominated to our select sales also probably have, you know, a viable interest in being in one of the regional sales or a later sale. Confirmation, how that horse is developing, where he is in his developmental cycle, all play roles, depending on, you know, where he is sired, what the pedigree looks like. There's certainly more pedigrees that are geared and are going to do better in a regional market, you know, maybe the mid-Atlantic region or even the southern region like a Texas sale. So depending on how we look at the pedigree, how we look at the individual, and how well it stacks up to what we're seeing in that particular crop for that particular year, are a lot of the defining factors in, you know, where we would make the recommendation for a person to place his horse.
I'm old enough to remember when it was kind of a cliche that the Saratoga sale, you'd get automatically the Virginia and Maryland and Pennsylvania. That's probably changed. What do you have a generalization about what percentage of Saratoga sale yearlings are now Kentucky breds?
Probably the majority of the horses that we look at anymore, just because of the decline in the regional markets and in that mid-Atlantic region, the shrinkage that is taking place, the loss that we've had of some major breeders in that area that were very supportive. So I would say a good 75% at least are made up of our Kentucky breeders.
Well, on that line, I'd like to ask all of you, it seems sort of counterintuitive that we start the day being reminded of how other states are beating us with better purse distribution because of slots, and yet we use the accuracy of the word declining regional markets. What dynamic do you expect will prevail? Do you think in 5 years Pennsylvania breeding will be much stronger, or just use that as an example?
The one thing I see is the prominence of the Kentucky market is the majority of the livelihoods that are made and earned in the state of Kentucky are through the auction rings. There are a larger propensity of breeders in regional areas that are more bound by breeders' awards, which are significant in that area. So you don't have to sell the horse for as much, but if he runs in that state bred program, there's certainly going to be money that comes back on the backside. So where Kentucky breeders or those that are pointing for Kentucky Saratoga markets are more apt to breed the quality of horse that's going to get them a return in the sales ring.
see.
Ed, can I just jump in here and add a little bit there too? It really just varies from state to state. We've seen no dramatic change in our Mid-Atlantic marketplace in Pennsylvania breds over the past 5 to 10 years. The breeding program and the incentive program, as Bain said, is geared more strictly towards the racing side of things. That being said, we've seen an explosion in the New York bred marketplace. That sale has basically doubled in the past 2 years as a result of the tremendous incentives that are in place, not only for owners of New York breds and people that race New York breds, but also the breeders. So it really depends upon the nature and the structure of each state's program. There's no generalization. As I said, Pennsylvania, not much impact. New York, huge impact. If anybody can predict what any legislature is going to do over the next 5 years, they need to be in Vegas rather than in this room right now.
And I will add that I do think in our Mid-Atlantic market, we did see an increase since Maryland has shored up pretty much a 10-year deal on purses, that there was more of a demand for a Maryland-bred horse in that market. Now it has certainly, it's smaller, and it's extremely small, so a bit of it was supply and demand, but in our last Mid-Atlantic yearling sale, the demand was as high as we've probably seen in 6 years.
Boyd, I know you weren't here this morning, but we did get that answer. Senator Thayer said, and with no uncertainty, the purses will be sucked back by the politicians in New York. So there's your answer.
Okay.
Okay, now let's turn to the process of selection. I know I work with Dr. Johnny Mac Smith, who's on the selection team, and I'm really aware of what a tremendous amount of work goes in and travel goes into that. So, Walt, can you kind of talk us through how the selection process works and kind of give us a feel for how much give and take you like to exercise? For instance, somebody who's been a consignor to one sale for many, many years, and yet you think now he needs to be in book 2 or 3 or something. How much give and take do you think is smart?
Well, we're, like everybody in our business, trying to put the horse in the best slot for him. And that can mean any number of things. We've all seen special individuals lacking in pedigree sell, whether it's Saratoga or Book 1 here, sell absolutely through the roof because he's a monster physical. Same can be with some pedigree disadvantages. With some super strong pedigree advantages, they might forgive something physical. I mean, the game is ever changing. When I first started in the game, if he was correct enough through his limbs, he was passable and could sell for a lot of money. Well, that's changed quite a bit. Now they're looking for a balanced athletic horse and may give some abnormalities within of the limbs. But it is a whole new ball game, and it seems like they're moving ever closer towards the real good-looking athlete. And if he's got any issues, they weigh him, and sometimes will give you a big price for him. And when you mix a pretty horse with a whole lot of pedigree, you're going to get a lot of money, even if he does have some minor flaws. And other spots, correct as he can be, if he doesn't look fast enough to break down, they're not going to buy him. And it doesn't matter what kind of pedigree he's got and how correct he is. Does that answer your?
Yes, thank you. Boyd, turning to the Fasig-Tipton, again, it may be my age showing through. To me, there's a tremendous prestige about the Saratoga sale. Do you have many people who just want that prestige, even though you know their product should be sold at one of your other sales?
I think for the most part, we're dealing with a very, very sophisticated and very professional selling population, both owners and the agents that we work with. And I think that we've all at sometimes had bright ideas and bright stars and think, wow, I really want to make sure my horse goes to Saratoga. I really want to make sure my horse gets into Book 1. And you've convinced yourself until you have a horse that doesn't belong at Saratoga, or you have a horse that doesn't belong in Book 1, and it's a pretty lonely feeling after seeing everyone else getting lots of activity and lots of interest, and you're sitting there with saying, I probably should have listened to everybody else. So I don't think that there is, an inherent pressure or an inherent desire from our sellers to necessarily go to a particular sale. I think that it's a process now where people are really trying to identify where will my horse fit the best and where can I maximize my economic return for this asset, whether that be in a select session, whether that be in a later session, whether that be early in the calendar year, whether that be later in the calendar year. There's much more opportunity for give and take amongst the sales companies and the owners of those horses to try to properly place the horses.
I think even more so, if you can rise above the crowd you're in, you win. And that's always been that case, but it seems of years late, if you're the best horse in book 3, you're going to win, or book 4, you're going to win and win big. Where if you're covered up with the same horse in book 2, you're not going to do as well. But I think right now it's more important than ever to be where you belong.
In the press, it's been generalized that a lot of comment that the decline in the economy sort of shifted away from the popularity of younger stallions buyers going to more established stallions. A, have you found that to be true? And B, is it now shifting back the other way since times are better? Any and all of you.
Ed, I'll certainly address that first. Yes, to answer that question, there was absolutely no doubt that as between years 2009 through 2011, the market shifted towards a proven product, and they certainly wanted proven sires. And one of the things that, we are challenged with is we try to handicap the markets each year before we go out. And that starts with the pedigree approval all the way through the physical inspection process. So in those years, we probably ratcheted down on what we would accept pedigree-wise, took fewer regional sires, took fewer less expensive first-year sires, and then probably took less second and third-year sires that hadn't made it yet because the market just didn't want to touch them. I think we're seeing certainly a shift in the market. Last year, a Desert Party topped the July horse sale. We had a Cantheros that stands in Florida that brought 300,000. So there are market changes, and as a marketplace has gotten smaller, people are going to be more receptive to a horse that looks like an athlete to them.
What about for those of you who have been in it long enough to have remembered the sale environment when stallion books were 40 and 50, and now there's such a dramatic change. What has that done to how have you managed that in the sale arena? Do you have a sort of mental cap that you would like to not go over in terms of how many yearlings by one stallion are in the same sale, or do you not factor that in?
I don't like to put a mental cap on anything. However, certain times I don't think that you want, if you're in a book with 30 other horses by the same sire, I don't think you want to be in the bottom 10. So, but somebody's got to be. But, and I think that you, the consignor, oftentimes will ask us, how many do we have, and we'll work together and get you placed right by a particular sire. And, the consignors generally know how they're going to stack up with the rest of them. But, if there's 25 horses in a particular book and yours is fine, I would want to get to a session to where that sire might stand out a little bit, which is what I was talking about a few minutes ago.
Thank you.
You'd certainly rather have a hot stallion. I can promise you that Fasig, Tipton, and Keeneland are not going to tell somebody this year, well, we don't want your war front because we've got too many of them, or we don't want your tappet. I mean, would you prefer that you race that? So, I mean, the marketplace, frankly, dictates those answers. And in a former life, I was a CPA, and I would have thought there'd been a real statistical correlation between the increase in book size, and it had logically to have an impact on prices of those progeny. And the reality is it doesn't. It's got very, very little impact. Now, if you're going to sell one well, it better be a good one. And if you've got a bad one by one of those stallions, you're in trouble, whether they've got 25 in that book or that's the only one in the book.
Yeah.
Ed, I will add to that, though. I think the advent of the larger books and the larger crop sizes we see by individual sires also reinstates the fact why there's a necessity for multiple sales companies, for multiple sales, because what it at least allows a seller and a consignor to do is divide those horses up and put them in multiple areas at multiple times of the year and not stack them all on top of each other.
Good point, good point. Well, getting back to the international markets, it seemed to me, following racing, that all over the world sales were up last year. Is that your understanding as you followed it? And what do you think has been the cause of that in countries that haven't had that shift in supply and demand?
Well, here's one thing I think that we have seen. I mean, we did see this economic downturn affected the world. Didn't just affect North America. So if you look what happened in just the Northern Hemisphere last year alone, you're seeing more people come into racing. There's a lot more South American presence. This year we had the Don Alberto group. They spent a little over, just shy of 11 million, 32 mares here in November alone, and then they went to Goffs and Tattersalls, purchased more. But we saw some European records fall as well, in the yearling market, a Galileo filly for almost $8.4 million. Then we came back with a Monju colt, was the second highest yearling to sell in Ireland for almost $4.6 million. Their mare market over there that was bolstered by the Paul Lynn dispersal. We saw Chiquita set a new European record, almost just shy of $10 million. Then you go back at Tattersalls almost 2 weeks later, and Immortal Voice is 8.1 million. So there is a global demand in the marketplace, and there has been. And the one thing that we do have to realize is we certainly are a global market. They have had the luxury in Europe of, with horses like Galileo and some very good studs, not having to leave. But I think, we now have 2 horses in Warfront and Tappet that are becoming collector's items as well. So I think the market as itself collectively bodes very well.
Good, thank you. Would anyone like to have some questions from the audience? I think we've got time and a great bunch of speakers. If anyone has anything, yes, sir? Could you let him repeat the question, please?
David, can you come on up here a little closer? We can hear you.
I was hoping their ears were younger than mine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, they are younger.
I'll say under our current catalog standards, we designate restricted stakes from non-restricted stakes. I think with the proliferation of the state-bred programs with the slots-infused purses, that the catalog should start picking up a designation between restricted earnings and non-restricted earnings. And I was just wanting your all's opinion about that.
I was hoping there was somebody else better qualified than me to answer this. Yeah, Terrence is our CETA representative, and I really wish he was here right now. But there are the greatest stakes committees, and the CETA process of determining black type races is under evaluation constantly. And there are several new requirements and implementations that are taking place really beginning in 2014 for the evaluation of races that earn black type qualification. And there are some races that got have been downgraded, no longer receive black type. That process is ongoing in terms to make sure that there is a proper number of black type races and that they are of sufficient quality to continue to receive that black type status. There's an independent, and somebody surely in this room is more knowledgeable than I am, but there is an independent evaluation of the quality of those races that's now taking place based upon speed figures and an historical average of those races for the last 3 to 5 years. Not just greatest stakes races, but all stakes races. So there's certainly efforts being made to maintain the integrity of black type races and to make sure that the quality that they deserve stays in place and that there's not just a complete proliferation of black type races in these various state bred programs.
Thank you. Walt, I skipped one of the questions I'd been given here. I was asked to ask you about the format change for the September sale. Can you kind of review what the changes were?
Sure.
What prompted them and how it was received?
Well, from 2007 until 2009, we probably lost 50% of our gross dollars in the yearling market. And something needed to be done to help rejuvenate the September sale. In 2010, Keeneland changed its format and cataloged a little over 200 yearlings for Book 1 to be sold over 2 nights. And then we cataloged 1,300 yearlings to be sold over 4 days, and that all occurred before the break. This change worked pretty well. We did sell some big horses that year, but logistically, it was just too much work for buyers and sellers alike to digest and sell 1,500 horses during the first week. So in 2011, we continued with the 200 horse Book 1 and cut Book 2 to 3 days, or 900 head, which was a lot easier for all to manage. One thing we did find out was that we could sell expensive horses pretty well in the larger Book 2 as we could in Book 1. In 2012, Book 1 was cut in half to 1 night, and Book 2 was held over 3 days with the same 900 head. And it became even more apparent that we could sell an expensive horse as well in a large pool of horses. So last year, we cataloged about 900 head in Book 1 to be sold over 4 days. And I think by all accounts, that worked pretty well. We were up 38% in average and median when compared to Book 2012's Book 1 and 2, compared it against Book 1 in 2013. The 6 and 7 figure buyers seemed to stay throughout the entire book and through the weekend, even into the next week. And I think that the market enjoyed continued strength throughout the end of the sale. And right now, we're not seeing any major format tweaks for 2014.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, everybody up here has been associated with a number of really tremendous horses. I'd like to just have everybody just review some horses recently that you're most proud of having been associated with, whether it was you're proud because of the price, you're proud because of the achievement, you're proud because of the consignor that you're so glad to see have success. So, Will, we'll start with you.
I'm particularly proud of the horses, the American horses that ran so well in Europe this past year. Those at Royal Ascot, Declaration of War, War Command, and No Nay Never. Elusive Kate was very impressive in 2 back-to-back wins at Deauville. So I think those 5 horses, those 4 horses really, flew the banner, I think, internationally for us and brought a lot of recognition to American sires in the last year.
Walt?
I'm not going to single anybody out for fear I would leave somebody out, but I'm pretty proud of the way our horses have run through the Triple Crown over the past 3 or 4 years.
Okay.
Ed, I won't go into any one horse, but what I probably will do is the body of work. And if we look back over what's happened in the last few years, and especially in November, At Fasig-Tipton alone, there were 24 horses that sold for $1 million or more, and that was compared to 15 the year before. In this ring right here, there were $14 million horses that were sold, and they went all over the world. So I think what we're seeing is certainly a rebound in the broodmare market. If we look at what broodmares have done, everybody was dumping them in 2007, and the average, was around 70,000. This year we go back and there are a little over 3,000 sold with an $83,000 average. So we're pushing on broodmares, $100,000 average in 2013, and I think just that embodiment of work in the marketplace itself, speaks multitudes.
I've never been known for my political correctness and won't be here. Mine's fairly easy in recent memory, and it would be selling Hob to Grace for $10 million. Had a close relationship with the owner, and the math's pretty easy to figure out what 5% of $10 million is. It's not every day you make a $500,000 on one transaction. So that's the most memorable one in recent days for me.
Thank you. Well, let's talk about the sire population. I know in any given time there are some sires that are aging and new ones coming on, and there's nothing much you can do to orchestrate it, but have you found over the years there has always been a kind of a consistent pattern that there was always sires to replace those that had left, and I'm not going to ask you to talk about any specific horses, but I would assume that with the results of the sale, you must feel very good about the current crop of new sires. Is that right?
Well, going back to what Bain said earlier, I mean, with what Warfront's doing the world over and Tappet, it's really good. And of course, in my early time, the states have always seemed like they've enjoyed having #1 stallion in the world, which over the past few years it hadn't been that way. But when we go to Ascot and win 3 races this year, 2 with 1 sire, the world is kind of coming hopefully back our way. So it's good to see these stallions making a mark at the very top.
Thank you.
And I'll add to that, Ed. I mean, I think what probably the most exciting thing about seeing the rise of a Warfront, who we probably haven't seen a rise quite like his since Stormcat, and Tappet, they are both sires that started at relatively nominal fees, probably weren't excitingly accepted in the marketplace in their first crops, but as they have produced runner after runner, it's become electric with both of them. What I do think we do see now is the resurgence of the stallions that are in that $10,000 to $20,000 in the marketplace, which pretty much exited the market for a short period of time. So now as the mare base comes back, it's certainly the stallions are going to follow.
Okay, great. Well, we can get right back on schedule if we can take a 15-minute break. And I want to thank everybody on this panel. I really appreciate you taking time and really enjoyed your comments. Get started. This is going to be a lot of fun. We've got another distinguished panel, and it is made up of David Ingordo, who began working in the thoroughbred industry at the age of 14. His exposure to multiple aspects of the business led him to establish Ingordo Bloodstock in 2008 with a professional goal of introducing people to the sport. He has had many graded Group 1 winners that he's purchased for clientels, including the incredible Zenyatta, as well as a Breeders' Cup winner, London Bridge. Patty Miller attended both the University of Arizona and the University of Delaware. She started as a professional jockey, then exercise rider, then jockey, then of 7 years a horse trainer, thoroughbred trainer. For several years, she was one of the top 10 trainers at Delaware and often at the surrounding Mid-Atlantic tracks. While she was a trainer, she set records at the Meadowlands in Monmouth, and she led the trainer stats in Delaware her last time. last year there. During her years with the EQB organization, she has participated in numerous sports medicine research projects that resulted in substantial publications in referee journals. As part of the EQB's Bloodstock Agency team, her auction purchases of unraced young prospects have included 3 subsequent Eclipse champions and winners of 21 Grade 1 races. Jim Schenk is a former jockey who has operated Hyperion Thoroughbred Consultants since 1978. Last year, Jim purchased yearlings for 3 of the top 10 owners in earnings. He recently purchased Grade 1 winner So Many Ways for $22,000. Other stakes winners he's purchased included Lomakey, Ambitious Cat, and Aurora Lights. Not in your program, but agreeing to join us today. I will say Frankie Brothers lives in Louisville. He and Jack Wolf, who's going to be here later tonight on another panel, decided it wasn't very smart to come to Lexington and then having to go back to Louisville with the weather that we're afraid we're going to be getting. So we're awfully glad to have Mike McMahon. He's a partner in McMahon and Hill Bloodstock, which was founded in 2001. He's a graduate of Cornell University. He also worked at the Irish National Stud. McMahon and Hill manages or owns Bourbon Lane Stable, Spruce Lane Pinhook, and manages over 100 mares owned by various clients. So I'm going to join them, and we're going to roll out with some questions and have some fun. I was asked to talk louder and closer to the mic, so if you get feedback, wave. I'd like to start out with just a question that somebody who's not a bloodstock agent probably has no real way of knowing. And I'll start with Mr. Ingorda. Ingorda, all of you have had the experience of real success stories. Now, does that kind of play with your mind? Do you find yourself having to discipline yourself not to be looking for another Zenyatta? If you turn down every yearling that doesn't remind you of Zenyatta, you're not going to have much business, I don't think. But is that a factor?
Not really. Trying to think how to best answer your question. And I try to buy a type of horse, and it depends on who you're buying the horse for. You know, like for John Sheriffs, he likes a certain kind, but John Sattler likes another kind. And when I'm out there looking, I just try to pick the best type. That's an athlete, and the sales panels guys, they said the main thing, we're all looking for an athlete. And, you know, some of them might be distance type, some might be sprinters, some might be grass, you know, might be long on the grass or short on the grass. It just depends. So,
how about you, Patty? Do you find yourself the top horses you have bought, there's image flickering in front of you?
Well, first of all, I'm going to have to thank the CBA because I really do appreciate being included in such an incredible group and such a good thing. So, but to get back to the question, I think that exactly as David says, I think you try to, if you're hired by an owner who has certain trainers, you try to find horses that you think that trainer will get along with. And you also try to find a horse that has, you know, enough pedigree. Some of my clients are breeders. Some of them are interested in winning the Kentucky Derby. Some of them want to win 2-year-old races. So you try to fit the horse to what they want.
How about you? Are you ever distracted by trying to find a horse that looked like the last horse?
I don't think distracted by is the right word. I think that like Dwayne said earlier in the talk about limb deformities, it's experience, and so your experience says that you like horses by a sire that look like this and look like they have ability to you. So you know, your experience certainly shapes what you're going to like when you're presented a horse. And I work at such that I'm trying to match horses with people and trying to find good horses at a good value. So we certainly are always open-minded and not distracted by a perfect horse.
Okay. How about you, Jim?
I think we try to match horses with people too. It's we have pretty specific orders. We try to find the best horse that matches that order. I think the horses we've bought in the past that have worked, I think we try to think those are probably good attributes, and if we see those things again, I think it does influence you to have, put that horse higher on the list.
When you say you get pretty specific orders, give me some examples. Would someone say, hey, I want a sprinter for less than $30,000 that figures to race early in the year? Was it that sort of thing?
It can really vary. This year we had an order to buy the best Speightstown. So she'd always wanted a Speightstown, and she'd sold a horse for a lot of money, and she said, go out and buy the best Speightstown you can find. So we looked at every Speightstown when we bought one, $360,000, which was a lot of money, but that was what she wanted, A lot of times we'll have orders to buy horses bred in certain states, which I think is very hard because the best horses are probably bred here in Kentucky and probably Florida. And most of the time, the best state breds don't come at public auction. So I think you have a tendency to buy a horse that's probably pay more for a horse than you should because you're trying to make allowances because maybe the competition is not as good, but you can horse still has to stand training, so you can't buy an unsound horse just because he's going to run against bad horses.
Yeah. Well, each of you have talked about relationships with clientele. How long does it take? How does that relationship develop? I mean, if a guy is you're buying for him for the first time, or a lady, is there a couple of years before you feel you've really into that person's, you got her preferences in your mind?
I think that most of our clients, they trust our experience to pick out the horses for them. So, once we know what they're looking for and our track record speaks for itself, they're not really micromanaging the purchase as much. Now, we do have some clients, naturally, and all of you here have seen them, that are at the sale with us, and they want a more active role, and that's certainly their right. You run the gamut there from top to bottom based on how involved the client wants to be.
How about you? You were speaking of, Mr. Sheriff likes a certain type and somebody else likes another. That's something that you, being at the racetrack, did you already know that from watching their careers, or did you have to sit down and get them to explain to you what they were looking for?
With some of the trainers I work with, I've started with them, and I've been around them forever, And then other people you learn by trial and error. And, how you develop that is, a trainer might come around with you for a sale and say, oh, this is what I want, no problem. John Sadler's real easy. He comes in the day before the sale, and he runs through the short list, and he says, great, these are the ones, I give him a little synopsis and tell him what I think. He goes through, he agrees, he disagrees. Most times he says, great, vet them. They're already vetted when he gets there anyway. Then we go trying to buy them. It's, it's over time. And it varies between, if your client or your trainer is a person that is an alpha person, which a lot of these successful people that are going to afford a horse are, they want a lot more to do with it. But there's other kinds that are good delegators and say, you know what, I'm paying you to do this, and I'm going to fire you if you don't do it. We don't get results, and I work well that way.
Patty, are you have had the experience of buying horses for people that you used to train for?
Actually, most of my old owners are dead. I hate to say, Tuscan Farm, things like that. I find, though, I do probably, I think that you buy horses, the most important thing an agent does is buy a horse that can run. And I think they are only as powerful as the team that they work with. And if you have a great trainer like Sheriff's, you definitely have an advantage. The same way, someone like in Informed Decision and Forever Together, they were trained by Jonathan Shepard, a guy who would develop a 1.25 mile turf horse. So I felt very blessed in that regard. So I think, yes, I think I've also known Jonathan. I live a mile from his, from his farm in Unionville. So yes, you do, it's people that you know and trust you, and your job is to represent them.
One of the questions that the CBA committee asked me to ask is, how do you select a team to make a short list, or do you do it all yourself?
I don't really have a team to make a short list. I pretty much make the short list myself. And then I try to put together people that maybe look at different things than I look at to kind of give an opinion on a horse later. I try to have, I'm not good at, telling someone else like what I want to see, because I think I really want to see it myself.
Yeah. So how do you operate for the Keeneland September sale? How many horses do you look at, do you think?
It depends on the day. I don't bring horses out I have no chance of buying. So what I try to focus on is like, what am I looking for, and get the short list before I actually go out and look at the horses, because I like to look at a horse more than once. I don't think I'm any good at looking at a horse in the back ring, because I think a lot of times you'll go back in the second or third time you see a horse, you'll see something you missed before.
Okay. How about you?
Well, I'm fortunate to have a very good team. Jamie Hill and Kelsey Lupo are here. My wife, Natanya, just left and went back to WinStar. She's WinStar's resident vet. And I did this thing for a long time by myself from 2001 when I started until 2008. And it's a lot like what he says. You bite off what you can handle that day. And I think you guys all probably remember me starting at 7 o'clock in the morning, probably not being ready to show horses, and I'm standing there waiting because we've got a lot to do, and I was a one-man show. Having a good team, whether you're selling or buying, makes you a better buyer or seller. I trained Kelsey in part, I guess a lot of what I like about a young person, in particular, since we're a hands-on farm as well, we prep yearlings and have our own mares and everything. But what I like to see is quality. I like the shortlist person to look for a horse they would buy themselves and not be too hard on legs, not be too hard on vet reports. Don't even ask vet reports. Let the decision come down to the decision makers and put on horses that you love. And great eye appeal, great presence, great walks, things like that. Great weight, great substance and health. Those are things I want my shortlister to find. I don't want them to take horses off because they're a little crooked or they're a little this or a little that. To me, at the end of the day, those are insignificant factors a lot of times.
Patty, how do you operate? Do you have a team that creates a short list for you? Absolutely.
It depends also on the sale, how big a team I have. Obviously, for the Keeneland September sale, I have a large team, because I'm sort of a multi-pronged approach here. First they start, and they know me pretty well. There's no such thing as a perfect horse, as Mike just said. He's absolutely right. So what you're looking for is a horse that can run. I also tell my crew not to throw out on pedigree, not to exclude a horse that might be a little bit crooked. Again, like Mike, I like to have that decision-making process. And then when we get to a short list, then we have to do some other tests like cardios and things like that. So it becomes a much longer deal. So by the time I'm through the first 5 days of Keeneland September, you could probably need a net to catch me.
David, how do you operate?
I've had the same core two people help me since the day I started. It's April Mayberry and her mother, Jeannie. I actually bought my first horse when I was 14 with Jeannie.
Really?
So everybody thinks it's my mother. She's not. She stands in a lot of times. But so they've been with me forever, and we've refined our process. Like, they don't even look at the catalog pages. They just mark the index, what I need to go see. And they know which consigners I like to do the barns myself. I mean, we divide everything up. So if there's 15 barns to go through, depending if there's 3 or 4 of us, we divvy it up equally and go through. And Jeannie loves to do Brereton Joneses, so I let her do that. And she loves to do Riley, so she does that. And I do Lane's End and I do Blue Water. So we split them up and the people we like to go through, and then we sit down and we meet. And we have a note, though, on every horse. I mean, when they write on their page, but then they circle it in the index. And, pedigree isn't important really to them or me. It's what the horse looks like, because we can't put tack on a pedigree page. So then we go through and make them fit what our orders are. And Jeff Burke is our unsung hero because I torture him fairly regularly throughout the sales to get our vetting, you know.
Do you often find that your orders don't jive with what you've seen? Do you ever find yourself turning down a horse that you really like because it doesn't have the pedigree that would suit the guy you're buying for?
I can honestly say I'm blessed that we now have a deep enough bench of buyers that at different levels, you know, if somebody says I want to buy $500,000 yearlings, well, you know, pre-meetings and the, you know, all the time it takes to get to that order, we've sat down and discussed with them, for $100,000, you're not going to get a war front unless it's got 3 legs, you know, or it may be in his first crop, but, you know, if that's what you want. So those clients understand that the page might look like Patty's sheet here on pedigree-wise for $100,000, or it might not. It just depends what we can do. So I'm very lucky that I can place the horses in the right spots. And I'm even, in some stages, I have clients that say, you know, here's your budget, spend it how you want. Again, they trust you. And, you know, I might bid to 100 and it's out of this guy's range, but this other client, she's okay at 200. So I bought a very good horse sitting right there, and I sat with the client with me, and he quit bidding at 400, and somebody bid 425, I bid 450. It's a lot of money. And I just called the lady and said, I got you the horse, and he's named Peace and Justice. We think he's pretty good. And the guy sitting next to me, he knows the horse. He wants him as a stallion one day. He knows the whole deal. But we were able to relay it, if you will, and that's just lucky for me to be in that spot.
Patty, how do you rate conformation versus pedigree? Do you tell us a little bit more about EQB? That's very much taken into account the physical presence.
Well, absolutely. I think a great racehorse, he unfortunately can't read his catalog page, and there's been some great horses that were by sires that were totally dead. So essentially what we do is we go through a physical profile. We're trying to see exactly what the horse looks like, what he walks like. Then obviously a cardio profile. With the 2-year-old sales, we do high-speed film. And we come up with, you know, per 200 horses, we'll come up with 8 or 9 in a select sale. So it's a hard process. It takes a lot of time. And there are people who just say that, gee, if you find a horse that you think is a good deal at whatever price, yes. And I will say that there's nothing that'll make George Strawbridge madder than a guy I bought a really top horse for $30,000. So I think you really, I mean, I understand where David could do it. I couldn't do that because, you know, I couldn't, they'd be so mad at me. You know, you're lucky.
There's a remark here about how important is a big walk. Of course, you have to maybe define that. I remember years ago, George Blackwell was a friend of mine, and his father had trained Roxanne, who was the 1903 English Triple Crown winner and later the broodmare sire of Manowar. And George grew up remembering that his father had said Roxanne didn't have a particularly good walk. And so George got in his head, and he was a very successful bloodstock agent, and he had that prejudice about, you know, don't be swayed too much by the walk. How much does a big walk mean to you, and that's in quotations on my sheet. What's that mean?
Didn't mean anything until I bought some that couldn't walk and they couldn't run. I mean, that's the truth. You know, I've been blessed to be around a lot of Europeans and European influence on my career. And he bought these horses, oh, his beautiful body. And when you're talking about a walk, I guess that's what you're getting me to, is that it's a long, flowing stride where the, you know, one foot kind of, if you imagine it, steps over the other, and it's got a big stride on it. You know, I remember a horse called Confide. He walked like he was like that, and he was a very fast horse, but he couldn't walk worth a dang. And he was an exception, more the rule. Well, in my mind, I said, oh, well, that works. I was wrong. Again, it's the exception, not the rule. So it's a tremendously important thing to me, but not all good walkers are good runners.
Well, I absolutely think a good walk is really important, especially when you're looking at a yearling, because you can't judge anything else. Now, that can be affected if they've been nailed by the blacksmith just prior to you getting there. There are a lot of extenuating circumstances. But I think for the most part, I've learned that I stick with the formula that works for me. So a big walk is important, yes.
Okay.
I think that a big walk is often indicative of a horse that hasn't had major problems in his hind end. And from prepping horses myself and raising my own horses, I know when they shorten up. They tend to all walk great as foals, but somewhere over their lives they tend to walk shorter. Usually it's because something happened. Some of them will recover and do better, and there's one out there running right now. It's a graded stakes horse of mine that Jamie and I pinhooked, and she lost her walk midway through the winter and never really got it back. Now, she's went through 4 sales after we sold her and was judged to be a bad walker 4 times. You know, she's doing well now. And when you question the trainers, oh, this is Carrie's filly, by the way. I see her laughing back there. You know, when you question the trainers, they'll still say she doesn't walk good, but she can run. So, I mean, you know, that's where I look. I look at it from the health of the stifle and the health of the horse's back end and the whole horse as a sign of how good they are.
Great, thank you. Jim, what's a walk mean to you? And I'll add another. Do you prefer to look at a horse going away from you to judge the walk as opposed to coming towards you? I know you'll look sideways too, but what's the walk mean to you?
I think now it's, I think we're overpaying for horses that have a good walk, especially horses that overstride. I think it's something that, you know, people pick up on real quick, and I think horses that have a good walk probably sell for a lot more money, and I think you can get trapped into paying. I mean, overrating that is something that's in the evaluation of a horse. I think from consignor to consignor, I think there's some places all the horses seem to walk really good, you know, which is, you know, I could pretty much put a little bit less emphasis in those consignors. I mean, I bought a horse in Maryland who basically just came off the farm, and the guy that led it was the groom at the farm at the sales, and the horse just followed him like he did at the farm. And he was never really trained to walk, you know, but he was a very athletic horse. He didn't have a big overreach, and he just kind of, I don't think he was taught to walk correctly, you know. So I think it's more important to me is like how the horse's feet land as to whether or not I'll buy a horse or not, as far as the stride is, and also whether the horse looks athletic, you know. So.
Good. Now let's talk about the differences in. I presume you all buy different categories between a weanling, yearling, and a 2-year-old in training. Is one easier to evaluate? Is the 2-year-old easier to evaluate because you do get to see him breeze?
If you play poker, you'll understand this analogy. It's like if you buy a mare and foal, you're going all in without looking at your cards. And every time we look at a horse as a weanling, yearling, 2-year-old, or even after they broke their maiden, you are seeing more cards when you want to bet. I love the 2-year-old sales. They get a real knock a lot of times from buyers because they think the horses are pushed too hard, and some consignments they are. But when you have experience and you're around it like we all are, you can tend to mitigate that part of the risk. So, you know, that would be my preferred way to do it, other than buying them when they run. But that's almost impossible now to buy a running horse because they're all owned by the end users, you know.
Yeah. Patty, do you buy many weanlings?
Actually, we have bought some yearlings, weanlings and yearlings and 2-year-olds. And like David, I think you get the most information, and you get a pre-selected group with 2-year-olds for the most part, especially at the select sales. So you have, I think the 2-year-old consignors as a group are very astute horsemen, and I think they also obviously have to do a lot of vetting. So I think that pre-selection is nice. However, I do think in the yearling market, you have an advantage that they aren't pardon the expression, chewed up. And I think a lot of the problems in 2-year-olds, when you get them home, sometimes you have to give them a real rest, and you lose the advantage of having an early 2-year-old. So, and it is, you know, dependent upon consignor, it's dependent upon a lot of things. I like it because you do get to see them move. We actually really look at them move in slow motion, and you're seeing their heart at a more mature phase. Obviously, the heart grows from the time they're weanling through, you know, their 2-year-old year, 3-year-old year, actually. And so it's, you're guessing more when you're looking at weanlings and young, short yearlings.
You gentlemen, like, you try not to shy away from buying weanlings too, or?
No, we buy a lot of weanlings, and, you know, I think the thing I would add to what Patty and David are saying, you know, is that with a 2-year-old in training, it's almost like a trial period. I mean, you can literally go to Ocala, and David's sending his guy down there, you know, he's going to be at every farm. He's probably going to see every 2-year-old 8 times before it breezes at a sale, and their whole team is going to see it, and then their team's going to look at it, and, you know, and it's true here at yearling sales too. We do a lot of farm looking, and I would encourage those of you who are consignors to allow farm looking. It really gives you an added edge to, as a buyer, not to fail horses and make your short list shorter, but as a chance to fall in love with a horse. You know, I can't look at every yearling at the sale, but if I can see him on the farm beforehand, I might just be able to keep that horse alive and on my own personal list of horses that I like. As far as buying weanlings go, it's obviously, you know, there's great competition between end users like Ben Glass, who decides to drop in and buy 20 colts, to, you know, over the years, even John Ferguson shows up and suddenly horses are bringing $750,000 and crazy things like that. But foals are a great thing to buy, and I look back over the size of the foal market and the quality of the foal market over the last 20 years and how much it's improved. There's still a lot of room for foal buyers because there are more good foals for sale, whereas in the past it was primarily dispersals and the culls of the commercial breeders. So I view foal buying as still a good market.
Good, good. Jim?
I think I prefer to buy 2-year-olds. I think the consigners of the 2-year-olds are very good at what they do, the ones that are left. I think they buy a very good horse. You get to see a horse do more. I think it's gotten harder to buy 2-year-olds in the past year than before because there's more people buying 2-year-olds. I generally don't buy weanlings. I think there's people that are much better at it than I am. We buy a lot of yearlings, but I think I would, all things being equal, I think it's easier to buy a good 2-year-old. The one thing you have to remember with 2-year-olds, one year I took every 2-year-old that sold at the 5 major sales and followed them to see how they did. And while like 80% of them won, from the time they sold to the time they won was a year. So you have to tell people that even though we're buying a 2-year-old, it might be a year till he wins, and you have to give the horses time. I mean, that's the great thing about Maggie Moss is, you know, we buy a horse, and most of the time, we give it time, you know, so.
Carrying on a little more detail about when you say you see them at the farm, it reminds me of, I'll name drop again here, Vincent O'Brien said he'd like to go to the farm and just stand there, lean against the fence, and watch the horse in the paddock. Now, you can't do that to too many horses. Is that what you mean by seeing them on the farm? Or?
Yeah, actually, I learned this from Dennis Foster, who's been a longtime client of ours, and Dennis had 3 farms that he'd like to buy off of, and one was Smizer West. And so he encouraged me to go to each of these 3 farms and just be there occasionally, and by that not be in the way, but just call and say you were going to go over. Maybe when they were coming in or going out, whichever. Going out is always more fun. But, you know, being able to sit there and enjoy the conversation and the inclusivity of a guy like Smizer when he's talking about his yearlings. And I was thinking about it earlier when he was saying about horses that haven't been trained to walk. I mean, old Calvin, he was as bow-legged as anybody, and he'd kind of walk, and the horse would drag behind him. And that was usually, you know, but Smizer always raised a good horse, and being there and seeing those horses. I think I bought a horse from him 8 years in a row and never lost. I mean, it was just fantastic, and of course, we all really miss them.
Do you ever like to see them on the farm, or do you have this, that fit your schedule?
Well, we obviously do go to the farm, and, in Ocala a lot. We also go to see yearlings when we can in advance. I think the most important thing for me, and why I do like to see them if I can at the farms, is to see how they're moving, if they're going forward to the sale, or if they're wasting away. I think an important measurement of, obviously, is stress is how they handle it. And so I like to go. I like to see them move. I like to, if I can. But when you have 6,000 horses in Keeneland in September, I think you're really up against it trying to look at them in the farm, I hate to tell you.
David, do you ever go to the farm? That fit your schedule?
I do some of it. We do a lot of matings for people. So one of the reasons I like to do the matings isn't necessarily because of some great love I have for doing matings, but I love to build a relationship with the client and the horse from the day the thing hits the ground. So, I mean, I have clients that'll have 40 mares, and I'll go once a month and look at the foals and do an evaluation for them. So I see it, from birth until it gets ready to go to September sales. And I like to see the horse move forward also, Every horse I look at, whether it's a horse in a guy's barn that's getting ready to run in a big race, or it's a weanling from December to the first time I look in January as a yearling, you want to see it going forward in its development. And that's a big help, because if you see a horse that maybe 100 people look at in September, and it's been getting better, and to them it's still kind of light and backwards and weedy and whatever, you're going to have an advantage. So I try to do it with people I know. I tried this year to do it like at a couple other farms, and they let me on. I didn't find it influenced my decision any for the better. So I kind of backed off it if it was just like a cold call. I would do it with the 2-year-olds, though, because it's a time trial, for example. And they can have a bad day. They can be getting sick. They can rider error. They miss the pole. Well, if I like the horse on the farm, and all of a sudden it just didn't do one right thing, but I've liked it 5 times before, that gives me a on-sale price, I think.
Mm-hmm. Now, when you say the example of a guy who has 40 mares, and you look at them from the time they're born, are all those destined to be sold, or in that particular case, or some?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. It really depends on the client. Like, Mr. Moss isn't going to sell anything, but we'll go through looking at them, and we break them and get them ready down in the Mayberries in Ocala. So I want to know about them. But, he might have a horse that he says, I don't really like this one on pedigree, and he says, put it in a sale. And we got a horse called Cool Samurai that I've looked at like 4 times, and my mother's like, I really like that horse. I was like, so do I. Tell him we shouldn't sell it. And he's been entered and sold and scratched. And he'll be second choice probably in the Bob Lewis. Yeah. I mean, so there's reasons you do it as an advisor to people to, whether you're buying them or keeping them to race, they're all meant to do the same thing. That's be successful racehorses. So we're looking at them all. I think something that we miss the point on thinking commercially is that this is the finish line in this room. Mm-hmm. And this is really only one of many jumping off points for them. So we should change maybe that commercial thought on all of it, because really they all should be racehorses.
Yeah. Anybody have any comments or questions from the audience? Yes, ma'am.
How important do you think it is establishing and working with the consigners? Like, I was hearing you guys talk about shortlisting and when you go to the sales, how important do you feel like the relationship and establishing it is, like for Blue Water with Meg or Allaire with Lane's End or something like that? How do you feel like you go back to the well a lot of times, or will you give the benefit of a doubt to the consignor for a second look?
I think it's critical. You develop experiences with people. They shoot straight. They tell you what they think, and they're right. That's very important. I mean, you're more likely to listen to that person than someone that you've just met. I think experienced words from hands-on people are very, are very well taken. I think the relationship between consignor and buyer is critical.
I pretty much agree with that. I have a tendency to go back and buy from people I've had success with, and probably don't buy off people I haven't had success with. So I think it is very critical that, to establish a relationship. Or mostly a confidence in people,
I think it's crucial only, especially at a larger sale where your shortlisting crew is pressed, everybody's pressed. What I like about certain consigners is I can say, gee, here's the shortlist I have to look at. Is there anything that they possibly missed, via a bad show or whatever? And to me, that's opened up a lot of horses that some people might have overlooked only because, their shortlisting person was there, the horse was jumping around, and, he kicked the wall and was limping or something like that. And I just find that that's really important. It takes a little longer, but I think these people, they're consigning the horses, they know the horses. Obviously, I've had better luck with some than others. I really try never to exclude anyone, however, because a good horse can come from anywhere. And you just have to you have to put in the time, which I'd say everybody here does, and try and find it.
I'm not quite that for.
Excuse me. Most of you guys buy for the 2-year-old sale as well. Is there a big difference between what you buy for racing and for pin hooking?
Don't take that one.
You want to take that?
Sure, okay. I don't pin hook for anybody but myself and maybe like a friend. I don't have a syndicate or anything like that. So when I buy a horse, I'm buying something that I want to potentially own, although that's not my end goal. They're to be resold. But I try to buy some that I want to look at because I have a couple right now that I've been feeding for 4 or 5 years. And, I'm still happy enough to look at them, But the answer is some horses are not, I might like them and they might sell okay as a yearling, but if I kept them to 2-year-old sale, they're not meant to do that, I've got a couple horses in particular I bought this year that if I don't get off the bus as a yearling, I'd be in trouble at the 2-year-old sale because they're not the right physical types. So, for the 2-year-old sale, you have to have a more specific, early maturing one that could probably take more pressure early than if you were going to pinhook a weanling to a yearling. You can get by with a scopier, kind of a little bit more distance-looking type horse for a yearling sale versus that same horse at the 2-year-old sale. He might not be quite as marketable, and you might mess him up and hurt your investment.
Go ahead.
If I buy a horse and I end up racing it or putting it through a 2-year-old sale, it means I was unsuccessful in selling it. I try to buy horses that I think can race, obviously, and I think that that's the most important part. I have owners that I purchase for that won't look at horses who have been through 3 or 4 sales, and they feel that they've spent too much time in a stall, they haven't had enough exercise, and this and that. So it really depends who you're buying for, who you're hired by, and what they want. But I try from the very beginning to make it be something that, God forbid, I have to run it. I like it.
I think there's definitely a 2-year-old type. And in years past, again, that select sale window was very early in the year. It was February and March. And to get a horse ready to go in those days, 10-2 or 21-4, the horse needed to have a sufficient amount of muscle right at the yearling sale so he could go straight into training so he wouldn't miss a day, so he'd be ready to go at Calder and breeze well on a heavy racetrack. That's a very demanding thing when you put that in perspective for most yearlings. But now with the 2-year-old season a lot longer and big money at the end of the 2-year-old season, I think you do see more backdoor yearlings that would fit for a 2-year-old sale pinhook profile. But like David said, and Patty too, I think, and I'm sure you'll agree, they've got to have the right angles, the right frame, and really the right mental capabilities to get through the 2-year-old deal and not be a basket case.
Yeah, we buy mostly for people that race. On occasion, we buy horses that go to the 2-year-old sales. I think you have to be even more selective to buy a horse that's going to the sales because you can't give them the time.
Going back to the routine of the sale itself, I skipped one here. At what point does the repository come into play, or do you use it at all? And how do you, in other words, what practices do you follow to get the horse vetted?
Well, once we've got our short list, which can, be broad because you're, again, like I say, I'm trying to buy a few for myself, and I'll take stuff out of the scratch and dent bin, that the risk I'm comfortable with because I don't have to explain it to somebody else. If it goes wrong, it's me, and I can live with that. So I'll turn Dr. Burke or Dr. Pierce, the Pierces, they do some work for me too. Go get, give them my list, and they come back, and then, the perfect ones are probably going to cost more money. So, and I know the people that want to buy those, so we'll talk to them. But when we get down to the riskier things, we buy the 2B throats anymore. Even to pinhook them, because I've scoped enough major stallion prospects now that a lot of them have 2Bs. So part of, I kind of came backwards. I thought horses were born out of the back of a Sally airplane. I'd never seen a foal till I was like 18, 19 years old, And seeing what those horses live with when we dealt with them on the track, and then going back to here and seeing the things that we can be critical of on them that are everyday, like, oh, really? Yeah, no problem. I remember Giacomo came in as a 2-year-old to John Sheriff's, and he looked at the vet list, threw it in the trash. He didn't care. He said, has this thing been sound? Yeah. Okay. I mean, and that's really, I think, all of us who are in this will be benefited if we can educate ourselves a little better about what really is a problem. And the research we were listening to here today is interesting because, like hind ankle stuff, I always worry more stuff in the front ankles, But the hind ankles, I never, like Burke and I argue about it. He says, oh, what if you sell it? I said, I'm not going to sell them. Don't worry about it. It'll be fine. And I never hear anything about the hind ankle, but I hear about something else. Yeah. But it's interesting. The research was different, Yeah,
that's interesting.
Well, I have a little different approach just because I obviously have to shorten my list down as I go. So I really like the repository, and I really like that people have that work. If there's a problem there I want to know, I may decide to take the risk and go further and say, gee, I'd like to have this horse vetted after. But for me to go through the song and dance I have to go through to get to a list, if a horse has, as a 2B, I have to say, I throw a 2B throat out on a yearling. And I've thrown out a couple very good horses on 2B throats as well at 2-year-old sales. So the scoping is something that I think needs much more research and to be understood. It is a subjective call, I think, on the part of the veterinarian. And I think they're looking at a moment of time. I think if there's scope when it's late in the day, that same horse that looks a 2B late in the day, the next morning might look like a 2A. And there's a lot that goes into that. So I like the repository. It's hard for me at OBS where they don't have the repository. In some of the sales, they have the guarantee. Because if it is something that's not quite up to my standards, what do I do then? So it ends up being, a vet free-for-all, and they aren't free. That's the sad part about it.
Well, I mean, everybody, I've already referenced Natanya once. My wife's a veterinarian, and she's very qualified. So I also have a different, certainly different relationship than any of the speakers here.
Is the vetting free for you?
The vetting is not free. Jamie pays half. I do, with all the consignors that I deal with, all of you out here that are friends, and we're always, I am asking you, what does your vet report say? And most of you will say, it's clean, let me show you. And I say, I don't need to see it. If you're telling me it's clean, then that's all there is to it, And those are the kind of things that I remember when they're not clean. So we do ask that question. We do trust but verify. I find that we're very forgiving on a lot of vet issues. just because it's a little bit like David said with sheriffs. I mean, when you've been working with somebody for a long period of time buying horses, which Natanya and I have, you do have a feeling of what's okay and what's not okay. And we really like to tie it to conformation. We like to look, when they were talking about spurs and things like that, I mean, and footfall and how a foot tracks, you know, we do definitely vet harder on horses that are not walking clean. And it's an important thing. Our best pinhook ever, and this is like a Carrie Brogdon story, again, Carrie reference, you know, I think she had like 6 lesions and then sold for $725 as a yearling. So, you know, you learn, your veterinarian learns what you're willing to risk, you learn what your veterinarian's tolerance for risk are, and you make your best informed decision.
Thank you.
I think the repository has contributed to the horses bringing more money. I think it gives buyers much more confidence, especially your clients, because it's something they can kind of understand. I've known Dr. Brandon since I was a teenager, and I've got a great relationship with him. And he passes some horses that other people don't pass, and he turns down horses a lot of people don't like. But I'm very confident in him, and if he really likes a horse, then it influences me to go buy it. You know.
Let's turn now to pedigree. Think in terms of a yearling or a weanling that's by a young stallion, unproven. Are there things you would just require in a stallion before you were interested in good money? Did he have to be a Grade 1 winner? Does he have to have a strong female family? What are some of the characteristics that you really think are important in a young stallion?
Well, I always think about stallions like they stand on a tripod, if you will. They have to have race record, pedigree, and looks. And I think they can get by a little bit on race record if they're not a Grade 1 winner, but we're brilliant kind of horses, and maybe they got hurt or something, but they've got the pedigree and they looks with it. I find that stallions that are, you know, kind of outside that pattern, if you will, the outliers they were saying earlier, like a Skip Away was an awesome runner, you know, and okay looking, but he had 0 pedigree. I think those kind find it harder to make a stallion. So I would, you know, not turn down a really good physical if he's by a stallion I wasn't too keen on, but the price was right. You know, then it becomes a price point, and I think that's what the pedigree really best does for you, is tells you what you could probably pay for the horse.
Mm-hmm. Patty?
Boy, I'll tell you, one thing, if you want to look like a fool, say something definite about a horse, and I think that's a little bit what goes on in the sires. I think great racehorses come from all different places. That being said, I think there is a lot of weight to pedigree, because you look at a horse like Kitten's Joy, you look at some of these horses that just produce, you know, again and again, great racehorses. Mr. Prospector was one that I think back of a horse that was kind of not a great racehorse. I never saw him myself, but he apparently wasn't a great physical, but, you know, good physical, but he wasn't imposing, and boy, what a sire. So, you know, I think from where I come from, I think I just go for the individual, and the mares I breed, I try to stay with the most proven quantity I can for what I can afford, and I leave the pedigree decisions made to some of my clients are great breeders, and they will weed through that list and continually, again and again, pick out the best horses on a list of 5 horses. So pedigree means something.
Good. How about you, Mike?
I like precocity in stallions. I like stallions that have early 2-year-old form, either at a sale. I love sales 2-year-olds or sales yearlings that we all have them, those horses that you just remember looking at them at Saratoga at the select sale or in book 1 at somebody's consignment. Just that early maturing yearling that was just so perfect, or that 2-year-old that was so nice. And then, you know, seeing them break their maiden at a place like Saratoga and moving on to Belmont and coming to Churchill. I mean, I like dirt form at 2 for a stallion indicator. I like it even better when it's coupled with dirt form at 3. And, that's the American classic horse. So I'm pretty traditional as far as that goes.
Jim?
I'll generally buy first-year stallions because I think that they're bred to probably the best group of mares that they're going to get for the next 3 or 4 years. And if they're going to, even if they're not a successful stallion, they got a better chance of getting a good horse the first year. Generally other than that, we mostly buy horses by proven sires. A lot of times there'll be a stallion that, like buying for Maggie Moss, she watches a zillion races, and she seems to be a little ahead of most people on stallions. And we like to buy horses that we used to call them wake-up stallions. It just seems like every horse by that stallion runs. I mean, like Pulpit. I think most of the Pulpits, we had a lot of luck with him. Speightstown's kind of the same way. It seems like every time you see a horse buy that stallion in a race, you have to beat it.
Again, we're coming to the end of this session. A few more minutes. Does anyone have a question?
I had one question for the panel regarding airway issues at 2-year-old and training sales. Mm-hmm. And Dr. Pierce probably said it best today when he alluded to the fact that the resting endoscopic exam in a stall has some severe limitations as far as assessing an airway. And I know that you probably all have people at the 2-year-old sales who are standing and listening to the horses as they gallop out to see if they're making any noise. And I'd just like to hear your comments on any correlations you might have between the veterinary scoping information that you get on these horses and then any noises or any observations that you'd have on the gallop out as far as noise.
We should let David, please answer your veterinarian's question.
Yeah, geez, Doc, I was trying to be nice to you up here. First thing we do listen in the chute, but we also have equipment notes. I actually will stand on the road at OBS and watch the horses come up, and that's a lot of times the first time I see them. And I note if they have a figure 8, tongue tie, or they're wearing a ring bit, or they got some other things on there, trickery, if you will. And you can't see it in the videos, but yeah, so you hear a horse making noise. Is he got a bunch of equipment on him? Then God, that wasn't the first time that horse ever did that. If you hear a horse go by and he's got a D-bit on and you like how he went, and at the end of it maybe he's a little tired and the consignor's not one of the super duper pros, but they're just good horse people, I'd give that horse a benefit of the doubt, and I'll say, hey, Doc, go scope this horse, and I don't try to influence my veterinarian because I want him to come back and, say what he saw, and then I will bring up when we're talking about it, well, X, Y, Z, I heard the horse make a noise or whatever, and, we balance out with what the vets see in the scope when the horse is in a stall versus what we see when they're going in the workout, equipment they have on, and the sound they may or may not make. And that sound, the worst thing in the world right now for a 2-year-old consigner is that they hear them making noise. There's 4 people in that chute that are really qualified to tell you what a noise is, because these guys have done it since the 2-year-old game started. That's the negative, I think, for the 2-year-old sellers. You tell me what you guys think. But there's a lot of untrained people there standing, listening to the airway, and horses get called as bad breathing horses, that it isn't a bad breathing situation. I saw 2 people on the rail one day, and I listened to a horse go by. I could hear it down where I was at with the road by me and everything. It sounded like a semi went by. The horse definitely had an airway issue. And these 2 people who were in the learning process were like, did that horse make a noise? And I was like, man, I'd hate to, either if I'm a seller, I'm like, I got by with one there. But if I was also a seller and it wasn't a problem, you might take a major buyer off a horse for the wrong reason. So all those things come into play, and I think that's the one bad thing about hearing the airways at the 2-year-old show, because I think there's a certain amount of people that do understand it, and then there's a few others that might need a little more training and understanding of what they're hearing. That makes sense.
Anybody else want to comment on that one?
Well, I will, because I think it's very important. I think I have 3 people that listen for me, and I have heard them say horses made noises that went on and, ran very well. And I've had a horse, the one I got away, none of them heard anything, and he had a 2B throat, and they were right. He didn't. He went on and was this very successful classic horse. So I think the hardest thing, though, is that as agents, we're paid to protect the buyer. And what happens to me as soon as I get into a situation where I have to weigh all these variables, especially a throat issue, which is a very important issue. I have a couple guys that scope for me, and I listen to everyone. To me, it's important that I not buy a horse that can't breathe, and I've done it. I'm sure I have good company in this. And I also ask the consignor, have they ever heard the horse make a noise? And I've had people back there when the horse went roaring by, and they said, oh, no, never. So, it's really a very difficult task, and I think it's a very subjective thing. I think it needs a lot of research. I think, boy, do we need research in this game, I think. That's one of them.
Thank you.
Scoping is very subjective. Jeff, you and Pierce are great vets and might have different opinions on a horse, rarely. When you do get to go to a 2-year-old sale and listen to them, you at least have, not only do you have kind of the scientific or the veterinary opinion, but you have the real life in front of you. So I view that, I guess if a horse made my short list, that means I thought he was quiet enough and breathed well, and then you vet him and you gave him a 2B, I would be okay with it.
Yeah.
I pretty much rely on the veterinarian to scope the horse, when he scopes the horse's opinion. I don't want a horse that, makes a noise, and I think the most disheartening thing you can do is buy a horse that can't breathe. Because most of them can run,
Okay, well, thank you very much. We've had another good session, and we're right on schedule. I want to thank this panel. Thank you very much, and thanks for your attention. We're going to move along rather than taking another break, since we're so near the end of the day. We're turning now to a charity. As you know, there are many charities involved with racing. I work for the Grayson Foundation. We do research, veterinary research. There's the Thoroughbred Charities of America that does wonderful work. So we could spend a lot of time talking about a lot of charities, but we're going to zero in on one today, and that's the Thoroughbred Aftercare Alliance. And it's under dynamic new leadership, and James Hasty, the executive director, is here today. He grew up on a small horse farm in Casanova, New York, and obtained a BS in business management from Le Moyne College and an MS in communications management from Syracuse. He joined TAA in November of last year. Prior to that, he gained over 20 years' experience in communications and development while working for the American Red Cross, State University of New York, IMG, the 201 Zurich Rowing World Cup, and the U.S. Equestrian Team and Walt Disney World. He's been involved in horses since he was a child, from the U.S. Pony Club to winning the 1987 Cossequin Winter Equestrian Festival Circuit Championship. Now, he was the amateur owner of Jumper Division. He lives in Lexington now, and it's my pleasure to introduce James Hasty.
Thanks a lot, Ed. I really appreciate that introduction, and thank you very much. More importantly, I appreciate the fact you didn't take a break, so we captured some of the folks here that might have skirted out because of this ice storm I keep hearing about. As a New Yorker, I'm maybe a little less concerned about the ice storm. Casanova, my hometown, we used to get 2 inches an hour, 144 inches of snow a year. So I moved out here about, I guess it's going on 3 months ago now, and I have nothing to do with the bad weather, as people keep accusing me of. Danielle is passing out some bookmarks, and I see Patty recognizes me as the bookmark guy at OBS. I think I passed out about 1,000 of them, and I just want to share one quick story about the bookmarks. Not only are they a kind of a creative way of getting our mission out there in front of you folks, but one woman and her husband, who had just moved to Ocala when I went down there to the sale. Over the course of 3 days, she asked me for about 12 to 15 bookmarks, and she had her catalog all filed away, and she kept asking the show jumping guy, me, what all the statistics in the catalog meant, so I would grab Patty or whoever walked by and ask them to interpret for me. But after 3 days, it turned out that her son manages the record label for Taylor Swift. So the moral of that story is we're going to keep passing out these bookmarks. As a guy who grew up, as Ed said, on a show jumping farm, hunters and jumpers, this job is really a dream job for me. My sister and I, over the years, took in several off-the-track projects and were able to sell them as dressage horses, eventing horses, pleasure horses. One actually is delivering the mail in a very small town in upstate rural New York and loves the job, and he actually wasn't suitable for any other job. And yes, they still deliver mail by horseback in some New York towns. It's just it's a real honor and privilege for me to be here in a position to help find opportunities for retired racehorses. Having said that, I think Mike Ziegler is in the crowd somewhere. He's the former executive director who is now on our funding committee and our board of directors. So if Mike, if you want to join this panel up here, there's a lot of chairs next to Ed. I know I saw you. There he is. If everybody could please congratulate Mike and on the job he's done for the last 2 years. He, for somebody who doesn't know a whole lot about racing, he's been a terrific resource and still answers my calls. So thanks, Mike. The first slide is just something that I wanted to point out because of not only the audience here, but I know you guys are a competitive group. So in 2013, 24.6% of our revenue came from sales companies, buyers, and consigners. And when you break that down, about half of that 24.6% in revenue comes from the sales companies themselves through a match and through gifts. The other half of that 24.6% comes from the buyers and the consigners. And I'm happy to report the consigners contributed about 54%, and the buyers contributed about 46%. So if you're keeping track of any of that stuff, it is accurate to say the consigners won by a nose. So thank you very much for your participation and your support. Since Mike is here, if you just want to give a brief history of the TEA and how it all came together, since you were part of the group that put together all these protocols and systems.
Sure, put me on the spot. TAA came out of a TCA board meeting when the conversation steered towards why are we making a half-hearted attempt at funding aftercare when everybody in the industry knows how an important issue it is. Challenge was set on the table to ask for industry-wide funding, and the concept really behind industry-wide funding is a small percentage of a lot of big transactions adds up to a significant amount of money. And pretty quickly, a group got together in the spring of 2011 to start developing the plan. The business plan was let's get like-minded people together, let's come up with a structure for funding, and let's see what sticks. The first group of individuals to step up were the Breeders' Cup, Keeneland, and Jockey Club, who put seed money into the organization. And almost simultaneously, the sales companies, as a facilitator for the consigners and buyers, as well as their own contributions, and the stallion owners around Central Kentucky, as well as the Jockey Club through their registration business, decided to basically do this, put small amounts of money from all these different transactions together with the long-term goal of getting the entire industry on board, because really at the end of the day, this thing does not work without the full support of the entire industry. We're satisfied with where we are, but we have a long way to go.
Wanted to thank again Keeneland for not only hosting this, but for being one of the seed investors. Our seed investors make it possible so that every dollar the funding committee, our board, and myself raise goes directly to the care of the horse. So that's a pretty nice place to be and an advantage to have as a fundraiser when you can say to people 100% of your contribution that you've made through these sales companies goes to the direct care of the horses. So Mike touched on it. Why was the TAA formed? Industry-wide mechanism to fund and more importantly, accredit these aftercare facilities. As a new set of eyes coming into the racehorse world, I can tell you how impressed I was, even at the first interview, when I met all these representatives from different constituency groups in the industry that got together and, as Mike said, decided to do something to provide opportunities for retired racehorses. I think I'll just tell the story. I mean, we have a pretty robust and rigorous set of criteria and processes to become accredited. Some of these groups have gone through an 8-month process of becoming accredited. It really, when you get to the end of it, I've been involved with foundations and granting and that sort of thing for 20 years. And this process, when the facilities got through and they were accredited, there was a considerable amount of celebration and gratitude, and the feedback from the accredited facilities, like Exceller, New Vocations, Old Friends, some of the gold standards you've all heard of, as well as Naysavers and Tijuana River and Florida Track. Overwhelmingly, they all were very proud of getting through the process and actually becoming accredited. So I don't know if Mike, if you wanted to add anything about that.
No, I mean, I think the accreditation process is really what distinguishes TAA from the other organizations. These facilities are taking care of the horses, their responsibility. It's rigorous, it's time consuming. We review all aspects of operations at these organizations, from everything from horse health care to their finances. So rest assured, the donors can be confident that their funds are going to take care of horses.
And I'm skipping around a little bit in this PowerPoint because there's a whole lot of information, and I'm the last thing standing between you and the cocktail hour, so I'm trying to keep it a little light. But I stopped on this slide only because, as we touched on earlier, there were some folks that really stepped up in a big way at the beginning. And the stallion farms that you see listed here, if you work for any of them or if you know any of them, I hope you take some sense of pride in being part of this industry-wide approach to accrediting and funding our mission and the outstanding work that's being done by our accredited facilities. These 23 roughly stallion farms represent about 49% of the available stallion revenue that's out there. Each are giving us 25% of one season. So again, if you work for those folks or if you know those folks, thank you very much from our board and from myself. The funding side of things, I think it's important to underscore that it's only, or I shouldn't say only, but this 0.05% translates to $25 per $50,000 in transactions. And when you added all that up over the course of the year, you folks contributed, like I said, 24.6% of our revenue. That made it possible for Mike and our accreditation committee to award $1 million worth of grants to 23 accredited aftercare organizations last December at the Racing Symposium in Arizona. And we're hoping to continue the momentum, build the base of support, reach out beyond the sales companies, beyond the stallion owners, beyond the buyers and the consigners, engage the jockeys, the trainers, and 3 more just committed to 2014 yesterday. Also, long-term, we want to engage the fans, the racetracks. We're talking to various organizations about giving us support, reaching out to the fan base. A lot of in-kind contributions from HRTV, TDN, Blood Horse, you name the DRF, you name the racing publication, they're all stepping up with in-kind contributions. And I got to tell you, as a fundraiser, my phone rings at least once a week with the last time it was the Chronicle of the Horse, which is maybe a little less mainstream racehorse industry, but once a week I'm getting a call from somebody offering us a free page ad or a free banner on their website, or it seems like there's a growing momentum to help promote the TAA story. So if any of you are in a position to help us do that, my thanks in advance for helping us do that. And again, just skipping through the slides, Mike actually helped put this presentation together, and I'm going to blame him for all these slides, but there is a lot of information. I've just touched on some next steps, all these different groups. The veterinarians, I'm really especially proud of what they've done for us and the help that the AEP has given us. When I invite a vet that's done a surprise inspection to send me their travel or their reimbursement, almost 10 times out of 10, they tell me, don't worry about it. There were a couple of very remote facilities where a couple of vets had to make a huge effort to get there to surprise the facility. But for the most part, they're always saying, you know, I support your mission. I want to be a part of the mission. Please, you know, consider this an in-kind donation, and they write off the expense. So we're kind of winding down. And now that Mike's here, and I've got a little backup, I don't mind opening it up to Q&A. Patty, thank you. Well, and you and I talked a little bit about that in Ocala, in that one of the benefits of the fact that you folks are supporting our 23 accredited partners, soon to be more, we hope. You could, oh, I'm sorry, her question was, how much does it cost? Oh, go ahead.
How much does it cost from the time a horse walks into your program to you're getting in place to whatever, you know, if you have to retire him for life? God
Right.
bless.
Over the last 2 years, of the 960 horses that our partners have retrained and adopted out to great homes, and I've got a whole nother presentation on success stories. That's my favorite part of the job, is when I do go out there and I meet these people who have adopted the horses. You know, they've found beautiful homes, and a lot of times it's about a 3-month process. According to somebody like Anna Ford at New Vacations, she'll bring in a horse. 3 months later, they'll figure out if it can jump or if it's going to be maybe acclimated for dressage or something like that. Generally speaking, they'll invest about $1,500 into the retraining of the horse, but they're not. Our partners aren't out to make, you know, to make money. They're trying to find perfect fits for these horses. So sometimes they'll even charge less than what it costs them to retrain and to prepare for adoption. And I don't know if you've got anything to add to that.
It's a difficult question to answer because it varies so dramatically. A horse that comes off the racetrack, that sound, that just needs some time to cool out, could be a lot less expensive than one that takes some rehabbing and some vet work. But so it's really difficult to pinpoint.
And I actually met one of those a couple of weeks ago, a layup case that came off a track that the aftercare facility that took him in for a lot of the same reasons the bloodstock agents were talking about. Big horse, you know, looks beautiful. I actually profiled him in our last newsletter because if I'd had a trailer with me, I might have tried to take him home. But now there's a young college student who probably has a tremendous jumper on her hands, and 8 months ago they weren't sure if it was sound. So like Mike said, it just needed a little time to be a horse, in a paddock and left alone for a couple months, and then it rebounded quite well.
And further, we're not physically taking care of horses. We're taking care of the organizations that take care of them.
And I get that question too a lot. In fact, at the Red Cross, we'd call them mission moments. You know, my first fire, I'll never forget going to the fire and helping the family who was standing there in their pajamas, having lost everything. And I'll get these calls most recently, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. I think it was a barn fire in Georgia, and 6 thoroughbreds were homeless, and the neighbors were scrambling to try and figure out what to do, finding halters, lead shanks. One email to our 23 partners who have 80 facilities, and within, I think, 2 or 3 hours, some people from, I get a little emotional, sorry about that, but I had a couple of people from Florida respond within 2 to 3 hours, and there was a trailer on the way, a big gooseneck, and they had found, within hours, at 2 o'clock in the morning, they'd found homes for these horses. So there's kind of a spectrum of things that our partners are doing, from retraining to adoptions to layups, rehab. And I invite everybody to stop by our website, thoroughbredaftercare.org, because we've tried to put a lot of this information up there.
I didn't really have a question. I just wanted to congratulate you guys on the success of the TAA so far. And I think that the one thing that I've had a hard time trying to explain what you do to our customers is that you're not actually taking care of the horses. And I think a lot of our customers, when they were debating on whether to contribute or not, were saying, well, you know, that they're competing for dollars against this other organization or whatever. And I've tried to explain to them that what I like about this is that it's actually a systemic approach to solving the problem, as opposed to just another farm. The farms are obviously critically important in doing the hard work, but we need to come up with a systemic way to fund the operations and make sure that they're doing the job appropriately. So to me, it was just a brilliant concept. And I think the cooperation from all the different entities that have come together to make it a success can be a model for our industry to tackle other big problems. So it's one area to me that I'm really grateful that it has worked, because it shows that we can do something good if everybody pulls in the same direction and gets behind a smart idea. So great job to you guys and Jack Wolf and everybody else that was involved. I think it's been a big success.
Thank you very much. In fact, I appreciate your comments very much. Thank you. And when I first started here, I was hearing from my friends in the other disciplines. And one of the advantages of working for the U.S. Equestrian Team is I have friends in driving and reining, and lots of friends in the quarter horse world. My best friend just married a reining girl, and she's actually got him to quit show jumping, and now he's reining. And they have a farm in, well, I won't get into that, but the breed industries have actually been calling me in the other disciplines to say, how did Thoroughbred Racing World pull this together? Because they see it as a model that they maybe want to try and duplicate. So again, thanks for your comments.
And I would just add that as I look around the room, these are the pretty fair amount of our supporters are sitting in here. I really appreciate everything that each of you have done to help us get this organization going, because the base hits add up to scoring runs. So thank you all. Just, Martha, had a question?
Yes,
Go ahead.
I've got a question for you. I want to applaud the efforts because, as all of us know, to just kind of lay it out, we want to avoid any bad image in the public, and I want to hear what you have to say about PETA.
Well, Martha Jane and I were talking. I just met her today, and again, thank you very much for inviting us to be here, because we don't have a marketing budget. The money goes to the horses, so it's opportunities like this that'll help us tell our story. So thank you again, Martha Jane. But when I first met her, we were chatting, and I told her about an interesting thank you note that I got from PETA. And I know that acronym scares a lot of people in the horse world, myself included, because I used to be a vice president for a college that had a very large equine program, and they took issue with several things that that college did. But so to get a thank you letter from PETA 2 nights ago was pretty extraordinary.
Yep, PETA actually sent flowers to the Jockey Club when the initial press release about funding went out. So believe it or not, PETA supports this organization. I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. But
I haven't seen a check from them yet.
It's better to have them working not against you, I guess is.
And something that came up in Ocala that it's not something we lead with, but the AAEP and the American Humane Society both reviewed our accreditation application and signed off on them, and I think an important component of that is our euthanasia policy. One of the 5 factors that we look at in these accredited facilities, and all of this information and our code of standards is up on our website, and I don't want to belabor you with all the details, but one I think important aspect of all this is that our accredited partners have to abide by the American Humane Society and the AEP's guidelines on euthanasia. And I met several folks in Ocala that were really surprised by that in a good way, because they'd heard rumors that we were, trying to save all of them, and really, it was just an interesting conversation that I thought I should mention that aspect of the accreditation policy. Any other questions before cocktail hour? And I hope you come up to me, afterwards, and feel free to ask questions. And, Mike may know most of you, but I don't know any of you. So I'm looking forward to getting to know you. And Ed, I know, I see him in the elevator all the time. Thank you very much. Sincerely.
Okay, our final speaker is Vince Gabbard, who will give us a legislative update. He is Vice President and Chief Operating Officer at Keeneland since October 2009. He serves as the company's, he is a native of Northern Kentucky, graduated from the University of Louisville and Brandeis School of Law. He's had several posts in the federal government, state government, and he served as Deputy Chief of Staff for Kentucky Governor Steve Beshear prior to joining Keeneland. So if you look in his bio in your program, you'll see a lot of good service to the public. Vince Gabbard.
Thank you, sir. One more speaker that y'all have to endure before cocktail. Sorry. Now that we've learned how to rescue all retired racehorses, since this is the 20th year that we have had the gaming debate in Frankfort, this is more about beating all the dead horses. So if you'll pardon the pun, this is a tough subject for us sometimes. I want to give you kind of a two-tiered update, if it's okay, because we've kind of got 2 big issues from a legislative standpoint, in addition to all the smaller things that we're tackling and trying to deal with on a daily basis from Keeneland's standpoint, but also from the industry standpoint. A quick update on instant racing. We are awaiting hopefully a positive Supreme Court opinion on the instant racing product that's currently in operation at Ellis Park and Kentucky Downs. We had oral arguments back in August. We, based on those arguments and just all the tenor around the debate, we feel pretty positive about the decision when it comes. I think now it's just a matter of timing. It could come as early as later this month, but with the legislature in session, you don't know how the politics plays into that, so it could be later in the spring before that happens. That's one of the reasons that Keeneland has waited to implement that product until we were on firm legal footing to press forward. So that's a quick update on the instant racing piece. On the gaming itself, we're continuing to move forward and to beat our head against the wall on the issue. As I said, this is the 20th year for this debate that we're currently in. There are a couple of bills that have been filed. One is a constitutional amendment that actually has, it's the language that we wrote, so we're supportive of it. It has the 10% Equine Excellence Fund language in there, but basically it sends the amendment to the voters this November and would authorize the legislature to enact casinos across the state with a limited number of licenses. 8 licenses currently is in the proposed draft, but does set aside the 10% in the Equine Excellence Fund. That bill has been filed and proposed in the state Senate. I was actually over there today working on it. It requires 23 votes for a constitutional majority in the state Senate, and we're roughly about 21 votes. So we're once again a little bit short. The good news is we've got about 5 or 6 individuals to pick up those last 2 or 3 votes. So from a number standpoint, we're probably in a little bit better spot than what we have been in recent sessions, but still a tough slog for us. In the House, there has been legislation that's been introduced that what we call the enabling legislation that would set up the parameters for gaming once it is authorized by constitutional amendment. One of the things that's different from our strategy this time from the industry standpoint, especially from the racetrack standpoint, is we've always said, well, either give us the enabling that just authorizes the gaming, whether it's slots only or whatever it is, or give us the amendment. This time, because of the debate on the amendment, on whether there's equine excellence fund language in there or what have you, we wanted to go ahead and know the rules of the game. We told them that if we know what the rules are, if we understand what the end game looks like, then it makes it easier for us to support a constitutional amendment. Because from Keeneland's standpoint, we are not going to support an amendment that doesn't protect the industry, that doesn't have the carve out, that doesn't have the 10%, and doesn't do the things that we feel it needs to provide for the industry, similar to what all of us in this room have seen happen in other states all across, and including Canada as well. So the enabling legislation that's been filed needs some work. It's a good start, but we have all the racetracks, all the thoroughbred tracks have gotten together, and we have proposed a suggested set of changes. We're not trying to redo the entire bill, but we are trying to make the economics work for each of the racetracks. We're trying to make the economics work for the state so that we can help tackle some of the pension issues and the budget issues that the state's currently facing. So rough cap on just a rough outline on what we propose to do from the thoroughbred tracks themselves. We generate about $200 to $250 million a year in annual state revenue, and an additional $65 million to purses across the state, with about 3 times as much money as currently is in there in KTDF and KBIF, as well as money for racetrack improvements, marketing of the breed, non-race breeds, which we've got to do a little bit for as well. So we're trying to take care of as many groups and as people as we can, and try to bring as much unity within the industry. As I'm sure that you all may have even heard as this morning from a couple of other speakers, that sometimes is a difficult task, but it's no different than everybody in this room disagrees on what a good horse is when it comes to the ring here in September. So it's the reason that you have the debate. It's the reason that you work through all those things, and we're hopeful that through those proposed changes we can get both the amendment and the enabling legislation passed this time. Right now, I'll probably put our chances at 50-50, but we're not going to let something pass that doesn't support the industry, doesn't do the kinds of things that Keeneland is meant to do as an institution, as an organization. So if we're in a position where we end up having to kill our own legislation, then so be it. That's what we have to do. We're up there with very different motives than a lot of gaming companies and other people that come into our business strictly for this purpose. So that's the quick gaming update. I'm happy to answer more questions. A quick aside for you as well. The governor proposed his tax reform packaging today, which probably has less chance of passage than gaming, but it does have the exemption in there for feed and farm supplies, the typical equine exemptions that would bring us in line with cattle and hogs and everything else that is currently exempted from a feed and farm supply issue. So that's one of the things that we'll keep watching out for. There's a chance that if it doesn't go in tax reform, that we could get it put back into one of the gaming bills as well. So that, on top of everything else that we've got going on here, makes for a busy winter and something that we continue to monitor. So I'd rather answer questions than talk to you, especially after the legislative talk. You definitely need a drink. So.
Vince, Alfred Knuckles, just out of curiosity, I read that the Family Foundation is challenging the enabling legislation, saying it's unconstitutional, it cannot take place until the constitutional amendment's passed. I mean, is there any way of working around that so
there
we have
is.
our eggs in a nest before they get through with the amendment?
There is, and to their credit, they are very smart and articulate in some of the arguments that they make. However, this one is one that we don't feel holds water, and most legislators would agree doesn't hold water. The legislature passed, quote unquote, contingent legislation all the time, and the enabling legislation would not have the full and effective law until the amendment was certified by the Secretary of State. So while that's a bigger lift to get the legislature to pass a bill that would not be enacted until November, the legislature passes contingent legislation all the time, including a constitutional amendment several years ago where they abolished the office of Railroad Commissioner, and they passed the budget taking that money away from them. So they did contingent legislation thinking that people would vote to abolish the Railroad Commissioner and do those kinds of things. So it makes for a good story, and it gives some hand-wringing, and it gives a few people that may be on the fence to be against us, but overall, from a legislative standpoint and a legal standpoint, it doesn't hold any water. Well, y'all are thirsty. Just from a note from the industry standpoint and from Keeneland's perspective, everybody banners a back and forth about who's for this, who's for that. The industry needs to be in this spot. Keeneland is taking this position, and we're trying to be as consistent as we can with where we've been in the past. 20 years ago when this started, we were against it. We've been for it. We've been against it. We've been for it. And we're for it, but in the right way. And, Keeneland, since 1936, we have given, just in this small area that we all live in here in central Kentucky, we've given out over $20 million. This year we'll surpass the $20 million charitable giving mark. And while we're glad even though we were one of the seed founders, we didn't get the PETA flowers, the Jockey Club did. That's something that's very significant for us, giving that money out. And if we are fortunate or unfortunate to have gaming, whether it's instant racing or the full deal, you can be rest assured that Keeneland will use that money, will use those profits. It'll be done in the right way. And the three tenets that we've always lived by, that it goes back to the industry, the facility, and the community, will continue to exist. And that's not anything that will change on our part. And if gaming can't be done that way, and if we can't do it that way, then we're not going to be a part of it. And we're going to do everything that we can to beat it and make sure that it's done the right way. So from Keeneland's standpoint, when people say Keeneland's being greedy or Keeneland won't get on board, sometimes they're right. We won't, because we're not going to subject ourselves or lower our standards. We're not going to go to the lowest common denominator when it comes to passing a legislation, regardless of what it is, but especially on something like gaming that we've seen, all of us in this room have seen what it does in other states when it's not done right. So let's take advantage of the opportunity that has taken us so long to pass something and do it the right way. So that's from our standpoint here at Keeneland. Great. Thank you all very much for having me.
Thank you, Vince. Vince is incredibly busy with the legislators meeting, and it's nice of him to take the time. Just a couple things in closing. We are going to do a survey, and we'd really appreciate if we could get your feedback. Probably won't come out for another 10 days or so, but if you take the time, it'll help us make the next one better. The purpose of this was to give something back to our membership, and you, our members, are really important to us. I think this organization, there's a lot of people that put a lot of time into it, and it doesn't pay much, but it pays a lot because we all work together. But I've been looking at that sign all day, and education is a big thing of what we do, and I think it was an incredible job that this committee put together, and I hope everyone got a lot out of it. Integrity is a very important part of the CBA. We feel if you're going to put that sticker up that we want you to act a certain way. And our service is we're here to serve you. And, I'd encourage you to reach out to a board member if you have issues or there's things that concern you. We have to speak as a group. We can't speak as individuals, but it's an important part of what we do. And finally, I think one thing that really took me today was the number of young people here, and I would encourage you to be involved. Some of us are kind of on the back end, and we've been doing this for a while, but It's been a great industry for us, and hopefully it'll be a great industry for you. And it only gets better if you put something into it. So thank you for coming, and the bar's open.